A dream honeymoon turned into a chilling nightmare, a story no one ever imagined. It was supposed to be the happiest time of their lives, a fresh start for the newlyweds. The couple had just tied the knot after months of planning their perfect wedding. Friends and family showered them with blessings, hoping their love would last forever. The bride was glowing in her white dress, and the groom couldn't take his eyes off her. Their smiles on the wedding day painted a picture of happiness. Everything seemed perfect, but behind those smiles, no one knew what was coming. They had booked their honeymoon at a luxurious beach resort, the kind of place where couples go to make unforgettable memories. The turquoise water, golden sand, and five-star suites promised a perfect romantic getaway. The bride had dreamed of this trip for months. She imagined long walks on the beach, candlelit dinners, and the beginning of their happily ever after. But fate had a different plan, one that no one could have predicted. The couple arrived at the resort, holding hands and laughing like two people madly in love. They checked into their suite, decorated with rose petals and champagne waiting on the table. Staff members congratulated them, wishing them a wonderful honeymoon. Everything looked like a fairy tale on the surface. The bride's heart was full of joy. This was the start of their new journey together, or so she thought. The first few days passed like a dream. They went on boat rides, enjoyed candlelight dinners by the beach, and took countless pictures to capture every special moment. The bride believed she was living her fantasy, but behind closed doors, small cracks had already started to appear. The husband was spending more time on his phone. Late-night messages, secretive calls, little things that didn't go unnoticed. At first, the bride brushed them off. After all, they had just gotten married. She told herself not to overthink it, but the feeling wouldn't go away. Women's intuition is powerful. Even when there's no proof, the heart senses when something is wrong. The bride started noticing how the husband would disappear for long walks alone. He would return with vague explanations, avoiding eye contact. His phone was always face down on the table. His smile didn't seem as genuine anymore. Something was off, but the bride kept pushing the doubts away, afraid to ruin their special trip. On the fourth night, everything changed. The resort had organized a beach party for couples. Music filled the air, and laughter echoed under the moonlit sky. The couple danced together, holding each other close. For a moment, everything felt perfect again. But as the night went on, the husband excused himself, saying he needed fresh air. Minutes turned into hours, and he never came back. The bride's heart pounded as she searched the crowded beach, hoping to find him. When she finally spotted him, her world came crashing down. He was leaning against the bar, whispering into the ear of another woman, a woman who wasn't his wife. The sight felt like a knife straight through her heart. The bride froze, unable to believe what she was seeing. How could the man who promised to love her forever betray her on their honeymoon? Her mind raced with questions. Was this the first time? Had he done this before? How long had he been lying to her? The bride's world spun, but she forced herself to stay calm. She walked back to their suite, pretending she hadn't seen anything. Tears streamed down her face in silence as she waited for him to return. Hours later, the husband stumbled in, smelling of alcohol and cheap perfume. He mumbled an excuse, but the damage was already done. The bride didn't say a word. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the night over and over in her head. Her heart was shattered, but she didn't confront him. Not yet. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened, watching his every move. She needed to know the truth. That's when she found the messages on his phone. Flirty texts exchanged with the same woman from the bar. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a betrayal that had been happening right under her nose. The honeymoon had turned into a nightmare, and the woman who once dreamed of a perfect life was now trapped in a web of lies. But what happened next would shock everyone. Their love story had always seemed picture perfect, at least from the outside. They met through mutual friends 2 years ago. The bride was a simple woman with big dreams, while the husband carried himself with charm and confidence. From the moment they crossed paths, their connection was instant. He was the kind of man who could make anyone feel special with just a smile. The bride believed she had found the man of her dreams, someone who would protect her, love her, and never break her heart. Their relationship moved fast. Late-night conversations turned into romantic dates. Small gifts and sweet gestures made her feel like the luckiest woman alive. He knew exactly what to say, always making her feel like she was the only woman in the world. Friends often told her how lucky she was to have found such a caring man. But what no one knew was that behind his charming smile, there were secrets buried deep. As months passed, the couple's bond grew stronger, or at least that's what the bride believed. He proposed on a quiet evening under the stars, promising her a lifetime of happiness. Tears filled her eyes as she said yes, imagining a future full of love and trust. The wedding preparations began, and the bride poured her heart into every little detail. It was her dream to have a perfect wedding, and she wanted everything to be flawless. But even before the wedding, there were small signs she chose to ignore. Sometimes he would disappear without explanation, leaving vague excuses. There were whispers from friends about him being seen with other women, but the bride always defended him. Love can blind people to the truth, making them believe what they want to believe. She convinced herself that the rumors were just jealous lies. He was her Prince Charming. How could it ever hurt her? On the wedding day, she stood in front of the mirror, glowing in her white dress. Her heart raced with excitement. It was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter, a fresh start where nothing from the past would matter. As she walked down the aisle, his eyes were fixed on her, and for a moment, all her doubts melted away. When they exchanged vows, he promised to love and protect her for the rest of his life. His voice was steady, his words convincing. But promises are just words if they aren't backed by actions. After the wedding, everything seemed perfect, at least on the surface. They received countless blessings and well wishes from friends and family. Social media was flooded with pictures of the happy couple, with comments like perfect couple and relationship goals. The bride believed she was stepping into the happiest phase of her life. Their honeymoon was supposed to be the cherry on top, a dream vacation to celebrate their new life together. The destination was carefully chosen, a luxury beach resort far away from the noise of everyday life. The bride had spent weeks planning every little detail. She packed his favorite clothes, booked couple spa sessions, and even wrote little love notes to surprise him during the trip. The journey to the resort was filled with laughter and excitement. They held hands on the flight, whispering sweet promises about the future. The bride imagined lazy mornings, long walks on the beach, and endless moments of love. But what she didn't know was that the man sitting next to her on the plane had already broken the vows he made just days ago. From the moment they arrived at the resort, something felt off. The husband seemed distant, always checking his phone and disappearing for long periods. When she asked him what was wrong, he brushed it off, saying he was just tired from the wedding stress. The bride wanted to believe him. She wanted to hold on to the fairy tale she had dreamed of for so long. But doubt started creeping in. On the second night, she woke up in the middle of the night to find him sitting on the balcony, whispering on his phone. His face tense when he saw her watching. He quickly ended the call, saying it was just a work message. The bride's heart sank, but she forced a smile, pretending everything was fine. The next morning, they went on a boat ride, one of the activities the bride had been most excited about. But even during the ride, he seemed distracted. His phone never left his hand, and his eyes constantly scanned the beach as if looking for someone. The bride tried to hold his hand, but he pulled away, blaming the heat. Her heart told her something was wrong, but she kept pushing the thoughts away. After all, this was their honeymoon. He couldn't possibly betray her on the most special trip of their lives, could he? As the days passed, the distance between them grew. The husband would often leave her alone in the suite, claiming he needed to clear his mind. The bride would sit by the window, watching the waves crash against the shore, waiting for him to return. She started questioning everything. The late-night calls, the sudden mood swings, the way he avoided her gaze. By the third night, the bride's heart was heavy with suspicion. But still, she remained silent, clinging to the hope that it was all in her head. But deep down, she knew something was terribly wrong. The beach party on the fourth night was supposed to be the perfect evening, a chance to reconnect and forget the growing tension between them. The bride dressed up in her favorite outfit, hoping to reignite the spark they once had. They laughed, danced, and for a brief moment, it felt like they were back to being the happy couple everyone admired. But happiness can be an illusion. When the husband walked away that night, leaving her alone on the dance floor, the bride's heart cracked in ways she never imagined. What she saw next would haunt her forever. The man who promised to love her forever, whispering into the ear of another woman. It was as if time stood still. Her world shattered in that single moment. The trust she had built, the dreams she had carried, everything crumbled before her eyes. But instead of causing a scene, she turned around and walked away, hiding her pain behind a fragile smile. Because sometimes silence screams louder than words. What happened in the hours that followed would become a story the whole world would talk about. The night felt colder than usual, even though the air was warm with the scent of the ocean. The bride sat alone in their suite, staring at the flickering candle on the table. Her heart was beating faster than ever, but she stayed quiet, waiting. The sound of the waves crashing outside felt distant compared to the storm raging inside her chest. Every second that passed made her pain heavier, but she refused to cry. Not yet. The door creaked open. He finally returned, stumbling in with a half-smile on his face, smelling of alcohol and perfume that didn't belong to her. His shirt was slightly unbuttoned, and his eyes tried to avoid hers. The bride's hands clenched into fists under the table, but her face remained calm. Too calm. She asked him where he had been, her voice soft, almost fragile. He mumbled something about talking to some guests, brushing off her question like it was nothing. But she already knew the truth. Her mind replayed the image from the beach party again and again. Him leaning close, laughing, touching the woman's arm like she was the only one in the world. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound ever could. How could he do this to her? How could he destroy their love on the very trip that was supposed to mark the start of their forever? The husband staggered toward the bed, trying to act normal, but the bride couldn't hold it in any longer. She stood up slowly, her eyes locked onto him. This time, her voice was colder, sharper. She asked him again, where had he been? Who was the woman at the bar? His smile faded. For a moment, there was silence. Then came the lies, excuses about meeting a friend, saying she was imagining things. But his words didn't match the guilt in his eyes. The bride's heart pounded harder. The man she loved was lying to her face without a second thought. Her mind screamed to confront him, to demand the truth. But instead, she swallowed her pain and sat back down. Not yet. The next morning, the sun rose like nothing had happened. Birds sang, and the hotel staff went about their usual routines. But inside the suite, the air was heavy with tension. The husband acted as if everything was normal, playing the role of a loving newlywed. He kissed her forehead, called her my love, and even suggested they spend the day at the spa together. But the bride wasn't the same woman she was the day before. She played along, smiling and nodding, watching his every move like a hunter waiting for the perfect moment. She had seen the messages on his phone earlier that morning. Sweet, flirty texts exchanged between him and the woman from the bar. Her heart broke with every word she read, but she made sure not to leave any trace behind. He had no idea she knew. They spent the day together like nothing was wrong. They laughed, took pictures, and even shared a candlelit dinner by the beach. To anyone watching, they looked like the perfect couple. Two people madly in love on their honeymoon. But behind the bride's soft smiles, there was a storm brewing. By the fifth night, the cracks were impossible to hide. That evening, the husband disappeared again, leaving her alone in the suite. This time, she didn't wait. She followed him, quietly, unnoticed. Her heart pounded with every step as she walked through the dimly lit corridors of the resort. She spotted him by the pool bar, sitting close to the same woman from the beach party. They were laughing, touching hands under the table like two lovers sharing a secret. Her world shattered all over again. But the bride didn't confront him. Not yet. She returned to the suite and sat in the dark, waiting. Hours passed before he stumbled back, drunk and reeking of perfume. He barely looked at her before collapsing onto the bed. This time, the bride didn't ask where he'd been. She already knew. Sleep didn't come that night. Instead, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Memories of their love story played like a cruel movie in her mind. The way he proposed, the promises he made, the dreams they built together. All of it had been a lie. Her heart ached, but there was something darker stirring inside her now, something she had never felt before. Betrayal. By morning, she had made up her mind. The husband woke up late, complaining of a headache. The bride served him breakfast with a smile, just like she had every day before. He had no idea that she had been awake all night, no idea what was coming. She watched him eat, listened to him talk, but every word felt like poison. How easily he could lie, how easily he could pretend. Later that day, they went for a walk along the beach. The sun was setting, casting golden light over the water. The husband wrapped his arm around her waist, acting like the perfect husband once again. But the bride's mind was somewhere else. Her eyes scanned the beach, the waves crashing against the rocks, the isolated spots where no one would hear a scream. He leaned in, whispering sweet promises into her ear, the same empty promises he had made since the day they met. But this time, the words didn't touch her heart. They only fueled the fire burning inside her. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the beach grew quieter. The husband suggested they head back to the suite, but the bride shook her head. She asked him to walk a little further, towards the darker side of the shore where fewer people went. He agreed, unaware that every step was leading him closer to his fate. The wind picked up, carrying the salty air across their faces. The bride's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her face calm. They walked in silence until they reached a secluded spot hidden by rocks. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore drowned out everything else. The perfect place. The husband turned to face her, flashing that charming smile, the same smile that had once made her fall in love. He reached out to hold her hand, but this time she didn't take it. Instead, she looked into his eyes and asked him one final question. "Do you love me?" He hesitated, just for a second, but that second was enough. Her heart knew the truth. In that moment, something inside her snapped, something she never thought she was capable of. The pain, the betrayal, the sleepless nights. It all poured out in a wave of uncontrollable rage. No one knows exactly what happened on that beach. All the world would know is that only one of them walked away that night. The night sky stretched endlessly above the empty beach, with the moon casting a cold silver glow on the restless waves. The only sound was the water crashing against the rocks, rising and falling like a heartbeat. Steady, unforgiving. The bride stood motionless, her bare feet sinking into the wet sand. Her breath was heavy, her heart pounding inside her chest. The air felt thicker now, as if the entire world had frozen in that one chilling moment. The husband stood just a few steps away, swaying slightly from the alcohol still running through his veins. His face was half lit by the moonlight, his eyes flickering with confusion. He had noticed a change in her, the way her voice had turned colder, the distant look in her eyes. But it was too late to ask questions now. The bride's heart had already turned into stone. The silence between them stretched on, heavier than any words could ever be. She stared at him, her mind replaying every lie he had told, every secret message he had sent, every touch he had shared with another woman. The betrayal burned deep inside her, eating away at every ounce of love she once felt. His voice broke the silence, slurred casual, as if he still believed he could charm his way out of anything. "You've been acting strange. Is something wrong, baby?" Her lips trembled, but she forced a smile. The same smile she had worn every day since the moment she discovered his betrayal. Her heart was screaming, but she stayed calm, too calm. "You tell me, is something wrong?" He laughed softly, brushing off her words like a joke. His fingers reached out to touch her face, but she stepped back. The distance between them grew, inch by inch, like an invisible wall rising between two strangers. The husband frowned, finally sensing that something wasn't right. The waves crashed louder. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the bride's voice broke through the silence, low, steady, almost haunting. Who was she? The question hung in the air, sharp and cold. The husband's smile froze. His eyes darted away, searching for a lie, any lie that could save him. But he wasn't as clever as he thought. Not anymore. The bride already knew the answer. His lips parted, but no words came out. The truth was choking him. The bride's heart pounded harder. Every second of silence only made the storm inside her stronger. She had spent nights crying into her pillow, pretending not to notice his late-night disappearances. She had swallowed her pain, waiting for him to come clean. But he never did. Now, there was no more room for mercy. "Who was she?" she repeated, her voice sharper this time. Still, no answer. The husband's eyes flickered with panic. He took a step closer, reaching out to touch her shoulder, but she backed away again. The distance between them grew wider. The ocean raged behind them, crashing against the rocks like a warning. "You think I don't know?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You think I haven't seen the messages? The way you look at her, the way you disappear every night." His face paled, the color draining from his cheeks. He opened his mouth to speak, but the bride's voice cut through the night like a blade. "Don't lie to me. Not anymore." The husband's breath quickened. His eyes darted toward the empty beach, as if searching for a way out, but there was no one around. Just the endless stretch of sand, and her. His mind scrambled for excuses, the same rehearsed lies he had used so many times before. But this time, the bride wasn't the same woman who had blindly trusted him. This time, she was someone else entirely. Her hands clenched at her sides, nails digging into her palms. Every ounce of pain, every sleepless night, every broken promise boiled beneath her skin. Her heart was racing, but her mind was clear. "You broke me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You made me believe you loved me. And all this time, you were making a fool out of me." The husband stepped forward, raising his hands in surrender. "Baby, it's not what you think." But those words only fueled the fire inside her. Not what she thinks. Isn't that what every liar says? Her chest heaved, and for a moment, her vision blurred. She could feel the heat rising under her skin, the weight of every betrayal pressing down on her heart. The woman who once loved him was gone, buried beneath months of lies and disappointment. All that was left now was the rage. "You ruined everything," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Our wedding, our honeymoon, everything we were supposed to be." His eyes darted around again, searching for anyone who could interrupt this moment. But the beach was empty. No witnesses. No escape. Just the two of them and the rising storm between them. The bride's breaths grew heavier. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks echoed in her ears, drowning out every excuse he tried to offer. The night stretched on, the tension suffocating. "You played with my heart," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Now it's my turn." The husband's eyes widened, a flicker of fear flashing across his face. He tried to step back, but his legs felt heavy, as if the sand itself was swallowing him whole. The bride took a slow step forward, her eyes locked onto his. "You promised me forever," she whispered. "But forever ends the night." The husband's breath caught in his throat. The ocean howled. No one saw what happened next. No one heard the screams that were swallowed by the crashing waves. All the world would know is that by morning, only one set of footprints would lead away from that empty beach. And the bride? She walked away without ever looking back. The sun slowly rose over the distant horizon, painting streaks of orange and pink across the endless sky. The once cold, dark beach now glowed with the warmth of dawn, but the beauty of the morning couldn't hide the darkness that still lingered in the air. The waves continued crashing against the rocks, washing away footprints left behind in the sand. The bride walked along the shoreline, her white dress stained with salt water and clinging to her trembling body. Her face was pale, her eyes fixed on the endless sea ahead. Each step she took felt heavier than the last, but she kept moving, one foot in front of the other, as if trying to escape the storm still raging inside her heart. Her mind replayed everything that had happened in those final moments, his voice echoing through the night, begging her to listen, the fear in his eyes when he realized there was no way out. The lies, the betrayal, the broken promises, they had all led to this moment. But there were no tears in her eyes now, only silence. Her heart was shattered, but something inside her felt lighter, like a heavy weight had been lifted from her chest. The woman who had stepped onto this beach with dreams of love and forever was gone. The bride who walked away was someone entirely different. Someone stronger, colder, someone who would never trust so easily again. As the waves lapped at her feet, the distant sound of resort music began to play. Cheerful, almost mocking. The world was waking up, completely unaware of the storm that had unfolded beneath the cover of night. Guests would soon be sipping their morning coffee, laughing, and posting perfect honeymoon pictures on social media. No one would ever know what had really happened here. The bride's fingers trembled as she reached into the pocket of her dress, pulling out the wedding ring that once symbolized promises of a lifetime. She stared at the tiny band of gold resting in her palm, a symbol of every lie he had ever told. Without a second thought, she tightened her fist around it. Then she threw it into the sea. The ring disappeared beneath the waves, swallowed whole, just like every promise he had ever made. Her heart pounded harder, but she didn't look back. With each step along the shoreline, the past faded further behind her. The whispers of betrayal, the sleepless nights, the fear of losing him, all of it drowned beneath the crashing waves. He had made her believe she was weak, but he had no idea what she was truly capable of. By the time the resort staff began setting up breakfast tables along the beach, the bride had already vanished, just another face in the crowd. She blended in perfectly, her hollow eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, her hair pulled back neatly as if nothing had ever happened. No one would suspect a thing. The morning went on like any other. Guests laughed. Music played. The sun climbed higher in the sky. But somewhere beneath the surface of the ocean, the truth lay buried, carried away by the waves, never to be found. Back in the suite, the husband's absence would be noticed sooner or later. Maybe the hotel staff would knock on the door, asking if everything was all right. Maybe they'd find his phone still buzzing with messages he would never answer. Maybe someone would eventually file a missing persons report. But the bride knew one thing for certain. No one would ever find him. The ocean keeps its secrets. As she sat alone at breakfast, sipping her coffee with steady hands, the whispers began to spread through the resort. Did you hear? Someone's missing. A honeymoon couple. They say the husband never came back last night. What if something happened? The bride listened quietly, her heart pounding beneath her calm expression. She glanced around, watching the curious faces, the strangers who would never suspect the quiet woman sitting among them. No one knew the truth. No one ever would. By the time the police arrived later that afternoon, questioning guests and searching the beach, the bride was already packing her bags. Her flight was booked, her story rehearsed. He left early this morning. Said he needed some air. I haven't seen him since. Her voice was steady, her eyes filled with fake concern. The perfect wife. They would believe her, just like everyone always had. As the hours passed, the whispers grew louder. Search parties combed the shoreline. Police questioned staff. Rumors spread like wildfire. But there was no body, no proof. Only questions, only secrets. By the time the bride boarded her flight home, the headlines were already making their way online. Honeymoon tragedy. Newlywed husband mysteriously disappears. But some stories aren't meant to be solved. Some secrets are meant to be carried to the grave. As the plane lifted into the sky, the bride leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes. The turbulence shook the cabin slightly, but she barely noticed. Her mind was already far away, back on that empty beach where the waves washed away every trace of the life she left behind. With every mile between her and that shoreline, the woman she once was faded further into the distance. By the time the plane touched down, she would be someone new, a grieving wife, a victim, a woman with a broken heart. But behind her hollow eyes, there would always be the truth, the kind of truth that no one would ever see. Because sometimes the perfect crime isn't planned. Sometimes it's born in the heat of betrayal. And sometimes the most dangerous women are the ones who never raise their voices. If you've made it this far, what do you think really happened on that beach? Was it a crime of passion or the perfect revenge? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, dark, mysterious, and full of untold secrets, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. because some stories are only just beginning, and Crux Time is always watching.